consenting to the recording, retention, and use of the session. So it's just a friendly reminder, if you are not speaking, if you could mute your line, that would be greatly appreciated. And though we're not in session, it is still helpful if you identify yourself and the organization before you speak, particularly for purposes of the minutes. And a final reminder is that the polling is generally reserved for members of the board. So with that kind of friendly reminder at the beginning, I'll go ahead and jump into the roll. Is Cheryl Kashuba?
I am. Good afternoon.
Cheryl's here. Secretary Bogan. Or
Good afternoon. Avon, proxying for Dr. Bogan.
Avon is here. Great. Joel Hopkins.
I'm here.
Antoinette Kraus.
I'm here.
Amy Lowenstein.
Hello, I'm here.
Alexis Miller.
I'm here.
Dr. Conti. Is Dr. Conti here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, now I can. Perfect. Secretary Arkush is represented by Carl Feldman.
Hello,
Carl,
good
are you
afternoon.
on? There we go. Colleen Cavanaugh
I am here.
and Tia Whitaker.
I am here as well.
Very good. So we've got everyone present and accounted for. First order of business, as always, is to vote on the minutes of our last meeting. So looking for a motion to adopt the minutes of our August 21st meeting of the board.
This is Antoinette. I'll make the motion.
Antoinette moves. Give a
Joel
second.
Hopkins, second.
Joel will second. Any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll just keep rolling. We now provide the opportunity for public participation as required by the Sunshine Act. To ensure the orderly progress of the meeting, all comments should be directed to the chair. I will open it up for any public comment now. Hearing none, we will roll right into going through several administrative matters. I think the first, Devin, is looking at 2026 meeting dates. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to do a note at the beginning that I have nearly completely lost my voice. So I'm going to have the team cover a lot of the slides, and we'll try to chime in with discussion as much as my voice allows. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Devin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lloyd, Director of Strategy and Partnerships at Pennie. Just covering off here 2026 meeting dates. We do this every year. I do just want to note a couple of changes going into next year. We will have our meetings again once quarterly, but we will be looking at doing 2 of these in person. So the first in-person one will be Thursday, February 19th, and that'll be from 10 to 3 at the Pennie offices. And that'll be our strategic planning session as usual. The second one that'll be in person, though, will be our October meeting, which is where, the one today, we go through budget and some of those bigger topics. That one will be in person at the Pennie offices as well from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The May meeting and the August meeting will be virtual over Teams, and those will actually start at 1 o'clock and go to 4 o'clock moving forward. So kind of get out of the lunch hour and move those 1 to 4. So if there's any discussion on these, if not, we would ask for a vote to adopt these meetings dates and then also delegate us the authority to sunshine these dates.
Any questions for Jennifer? Hearing none, looking for a motion to adopt the proposed meeting dates and to delegate authority to the executive director to sunshine those dates in accordance with the Sunshine Act. Do we have a motion?
Yep.
Alexis moves. Looking for a second.
This is Cheryl. I second.
Cheryl will second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on, Devin, I will kick it back to you to talk through some federal updates. Or to pass along for someone
Yeah.
else to talk about federal
No, so
updates.
I will cover those this time. We wanted to share some federal updates since we last spoke or last met in August. Just as a reminder, we were looking at the September 30th deadline as kind of the last date for certainty on the enhanced premium tax credits so that there would not be confusion or disruption to consumers going into this open enrollment period. I'm sure all of you are following the fact that no budget was passed federally by September 30th. So we are technically in a budget shutdown, which means that we do not have certainty on the enhanced premium tax credits and their future. I will just note that in a shutdown, that does not impact current Pennie enrollees. Our operations are still moving forward as planned, and the payment of advanced premium tax credits to our current enrollees is still flowing. So there's no kind of present day impacts, but that uncertainty is still looming. And so we do have some contingency scenarios for open enrollment that we're going to be walking through later in this meeting today. But we are, about 2 weeks away from open enrollment, and so the closer and closer we're getting, there is going to be disruption if we do get a very late notice of extension. I also just wanted to share that since August, we've been in constant contact with our federal delegation as well as with our General Assembly. We shared some updated information on cost analysis. And so we are going to share those actually in the next couple slides. Since we were running our internal staging runs, we were able to get a more accurate financial impact of the enhanced premium tax credits going away for 2026. And so we were able to share that with legislators. We also updated our affordability webpage and put those maps and that data out there publicly. And so I'm just trying to keep that information flowing and be that educational resource as we have been throughout this entire year. Finally, there were also a couple of other late changes, more policy changes that occurred over the last couple of weeks. The first was the pending litigation that we had talked about in the August meeting on the final rule from CMS. We did get an order, and that did stay the start date of a couple of those provisions. And so we are complying with the order going into open enrollment. There was also some late CMS guidance on catastrophic plans and eligibility for those. And so just by way of context, catastrophic plans have always been available on Pennie. CMS is the one that reviews if someone is eligible for a hardship exemption, then they would approve that. Then the individual can bring that approval to Pennie and enroll in a catastrophic plan. Tax credits are not eligible to be applied to a catastrophic plan. CMS did expand the eligibility for those hardship exemptions, and so they will continue to process those as historically has happened. And then kind of the same way that people were able to come in to Pennie before, they will still be able to do that and enroll in a catastrophic plan if they have that exemption. So those were the couple of policy changes that we were tracking and also have responded to going into OEP. Are there any questions?
Not seeing any. I think you can keep going, Jennifer.
Great. So now we're going to roll into some open enrollment readiness information. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have been looking at processing our auto renewals internally. We have been able to run some staging runs. We are not yet through the production run. So these are just staging numbers, but we very much believe they'll mirror the final numbers. And what we're seeing right now is a successful auto renewal of 99.66% of our current enrollees. So nearly 100%. And that equates to about 481,000 individuals that we've auto-renewed into 2026 coverage. And that's 13% more enrollees than we had at the beginning of OE 2025. And I think it's just important to note that, seeing that it's 13% more, if we were able to have those enhanced tax credits for this OEP, we do believe that we could continue to have record-breaking enrollments and just continue to build off that growth. However, if the enhanced tax credits are not available, we do believe that you'll see disenrollments throughout OEP, and that 13% will be lost.
Jennifer,
Yes.
that 481's pretty significant drop from where we reached at the high of this year. Is that percentage wise typically what we see drop through the year? I think we were trending later than typical earlier this year, right? Like we were holding people longer into the year, if I remember.
From a retention perspective?
Yeah, we saw fewer people dropping earlier in the year, I thought.
Yes. Devin, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I would say this is slightly lower than the highest where we left open enrollment. We normally, without enhanced tax credits, would see much more of a drop throughout the year. We dropped a little bit and then sort of remained steady in this, mid 480s throughout the year, which reflects less of a drop than we would normally see because of that affordability.
Because we were up at just about 500. Towards the end of open enrollment or a couple months after that, I think, right?
I think around 496.
496, okay. So then the 15,000, that's actually less than what we'd see typically on a percentage basis in terms of the loss of coverage. Got it. Okay. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Devin.
Yeah, no problem. And there are, just a note there are people that we do not auto renew, for particular reasons. If they disenroll throughout the year, those are not individuals that we would pick back up. So seeing, that 99% success rate is historically kind of what we've seen, but it is just a larger number of individuals because of the way we've been able to retain people throughout the year. With that staging run, as I mentioned, we were also able to get some actuals on cost impacts going into 2026. And we now have the final rates along with what some of the tax credit losses would be with the EPTCs expiring at the end of the year. And so we had been talking about an 82% average premium increase for members. That was just based off of the loss of enhanced premium tax credits. When you couple that now with the 2026 rate increases, we are actually looking at a cost impact of 102% increase. That is an average across all enrollees. For some, we're going to, in the next couple slides, dive into some county level numbers. For some counties, it is substantially worse. It's 2 to 3 to 4 times what they're currently paying. And so this is information, as I mentioned, we shared with the legislature. We have the county maps on our webpage. And so trying to disseminate as quickly as possible the actual impact because it is substantially worse than what we had been projecting.
I see a question from Amy.
Yes, hi, this is Amy. Before we move on, because I think we're going to dive in a little bit more on the cost impact, I just want to talk about, I had a question about the auto renewals. Did your staging show how many accounts would be transferred to Medicaid or CHIP at renewal? Like if their income dropped, were you able to see that or?
Yeah, I'll actually turn that over to David, our Director of Policy.
And if I'm jumping the gun, please say so, and I can wait.
Thanks, Amy. So I'll take an initial crack at it. So we made 2 changes over the course of the year to improve our account transfer process and to ensure that we are sending people to the right place. So the first thing happened in the middle of the year, in which we enabled customers to maintain their enrollment with APTC, even if they've been newly assessed as potentially Medicaid or CHIP eligible, until medical assistance accepts them and says, yeah, they're on our side. At that point, we disenroll. But until that happens, they're able to maintain their APTC, which was a change from the past. How we applied that for renewals this year was, so anyone eligible to be renewed into a QHP, we did that. At the same time, we put everyone through, we reassessed everyone for potential MA or CHIP eligibility. In years past, we did what we call, we took a segment of people that we thought may have newly become medical eligible for MA or CHIP based on changes to the federal poverty level. We realized was that it was not capturing everyone who should have been reassessed as potentially medical assistance or CHIP eligible. So to resolve that issue, we reassessed a much broader population to ensure that the no wrong door policy is truly working as designed. So this number includes everyone who's eligible to be renewed. We're going to lose some segment of this because for people who have been reassessed as potentially MA or CHIP eligible. I don't think we don't have those numbers specifically yet, and we don't know how many MA is going to accept, but we did make that enhancement to our renewal process to ensure that everyone's going to the right place.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
And Jennifer, back to you.
Great. If no other questions, then we will dive into the county level impacts for 2026 premiums. As you can see here, this is showing an average net premium increase per member per month in dollars, and kind of those darker regions in South Central, Central PA are going to be hit kind of the hardest. And so there are quite a few rural counties there that will see their members could see $200 to $300 more a month in premium costs. If you go to the next slide, that shows the premium increase, which I think shows it even a little bit better. So as I mentioned, it's 102% increase across the entire state, across all enrollees. However, for certain counties, it is going to be worse. And so if you're looking at, again, some of those South Central counties, some of those members will be seeing a 411% increase in their premiums. Some will be seeing 485%, some 200, 300%. So this, again, took into account the loss of tax credits as well as the rate increases that were approved going into 2026. And so, again, these two maps are available on our affordability webpage and have been shared out. I'll also just mention that we have been doing a lot of education with stakeholders. We've sent consumer communications just to try to make sure that our consumers are educated as they have some decisions to make going into this OEP. And we have seen some good success and traction with visiting the web pages. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chachi just to share a bit of those metrics.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. Chachi Angelo, Director of External Affairs. So I literally just been pulling links as well from news articles of what kind of traction we're getting from our earned media efforts too, and just 12 unique articles that I was able to find just in the past 2 days. So also this is certainly out there in the media sphere too. So with our communications that we've sent out to enrollees, as you guys know, or at least the board members know, we started that with a postcard in May, followed that with an enveloped letter in August. We've also sent an email. We've now sent 3 emails alerting folks that that these cost increases are potentially going to start hitting their mailboxes and their notices. So we both have the affordability page, which is more stakeholder and media and policymaker focused, and then we have our cost page, which is consumer focused. So pennie.com/costs. We set a goal to have 30,000 visits to the cost page by the end of open enrollment. Currently, we stand at 39,000, almost 40,000 visits to that site. We've had very close to 400 different consumer and enrollee stories given, and those are also kind of a sample of those are linked at the affordability page. We've had so almost a quarter of those visits to the cost page have come just since the beginning of October. So significant spikes when we send those emails, and the open rates of those emails are insane. They're the one that we sent right at the beginning of October had an open rate of 65%, and the one that we just sent this week at an open rate of 56%. So really that message that we've been sending of read everything, read your notices, read your emails, read everything from your insurance company seems to be resonating. So just to give a little bit of some numbers behind some of our outreach.
Thanks,
All right,
Chachi.
thank you, Chachi. So everything that we've covered to this point is really based on the enhanced premium tax credits expiring at the end of the year, and how we've been preparing because the federal government is currently in a budget shutdown. Because a budget has not been passed, there is still the opportunity for the EPTCs to be extended. And so what we're going to dive into here in the contingency planning section is if we get a very late notice of the EPTCs being extended either before November 1 here in the next week or two, or while we're in open enrollment, how would we need to react? And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rob Schobert.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Rob Schobert. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Pennie. So as Jennifer mentioned, and as was displayed on the previous slides data, so just to give an auto renewal update before we actually get into contingency planning. So this is a unique year. This was the first time that we've ever actually had to do 2 test runs in an auto renewal cycle. So we completed one by the end of September, and we actually had to do a second test run at the very beginning of October, which we were able to complete, and that's what populated the data. So where we currently stand is we are in our production run for our auto renewals. It's a lengthy process. We're probably around halfway through where we need to be. And what we're doing is we're still hoping to have our eligibility determinations, our 834s, and our notices ready to be sent and issued the last week of October. So we're still on point. We're still, our contingency planning up to this date helped us get prepared for this so that we were able to implement a second test run, and we still should be able to make the November 1st start date to make sure all of the plans are in place to make sure that all of the 834s are sent out. Where we stand, though, is, as Jennifer mentioned, there's a great deal of uncertainty when it comes to the tax credits. So if EPTCs are extended, there are some key things that we're going to have to consider. And we're going to go into a little more detail on the slides, but just to give a kind of like a roadmap of what our key considerations are. So first and foremost is we're going to have to rerun auto renewals. Now, if we got an extension, say today, that might not be possible, or it might not be the biggest problem because we could still we could pause our current production run, implement the new rates, and then finish the production run. What is more likely, though, is if we do not get an extension by, say, the end of this month, at that point, we're definitely going to have to do a new auto renewal cycle where we will run everyone again with the EPTC eligibility to make sure that they're given the correct premium tax credit rates. One of the complexities that comes with that is there could possibly be a period of time where someone could go in and they could actively shop with their 2026 plans that have been updated to the EPTC rates. If anyone does take that type of action, we have to figure out a way to exclude them so that they continue having the plan that they had chosen to enroll in and are not just auto-renewed into the plan that they had, for 2025. Because if they actively shopped, we want to exclude them. So that's one thing that we always have to keep an eye on. Another thing is we have to really be sure to over-communicate. So if anyone did take an action, whether they change plans and want to keep that plan, or whether they disenroll, and I think the disenrollment is probably the most important figure, we'd want to communicate to them to let them know that EPTCs have been extended and that they could come back and they could, get their enrollment reinstated. Additional things that we have been considering are, do we extend open enrollment or create special enrollment periods for people to use so that if EPTCs are extended, they have more time available to make sure that they select the correct plan for them. And then the final key consideration that we have is that we'd want to send out special communications to all of our stakeholders. So not just enrollees, but every stakeholder that we have, assisters, brokers, whomever, making sure that they are informed that this financial assistance is available, and then really over communicating each step. Because if there are any delays, if there are new notices that are contradicting previous notices, we want to make sure that they're able to easily access information to explain what that discrepancy might be, and so that they're properly informed with what that means for their specific coverage. On the next slide, we go over just a couple. So from August's board meeting, if you remember, we discussed two scenarios for contingency planning with enhanced premium tax credits. And really, it boils down to two things. Was there an extension in September? That was scenario one. We know that did not occur, so that one's no longer possible. The second scenario would be, is there an extension within October? Still technically a possibility. It doesn't look too optimistic right now as things currently stand, but it's still a possibility. So scenario two could still come into play. And scenario two is essentially if we have an extension before the final renewal run has been completed, or the production run, then we could still pause that. No notices go out. We don't give anyone the renewed eligibility with the non-EPTC rates, and we try to clean up that data and make sure that everyone's apprised of where they stand. What's probably more likely are the other two scenarios that we're going to discuss today. And these are a little different than the discussion that we had in August, because in August we had kind of clear cut, here are the steps that we need to take. But with these two scenarios, there's a lot more nuance. And it's more of, here are the considerations we would have to make, but we would most likely need an emergency board meeting to go through what those considerations are and make sure we're on the same page. So scenario three in this situation would be that they're extended after open enrollment starts, but before January 1st. So, effective date of coverage has not started, but our open enrollment period has started. And scenario four is what happens if those extensions occur after January 1st. So, consumer coverage has already begun. The effective date of their coverage has already taken place. What do we do in that situation? The next slide goes through scenario three. So as we go through each of these scenarios, it gets more complicated. So scenario three is much more complicated than scenarios 1 and 2 were, and scenario 4 is the most complex of each of these contingency plans. So in scenario three, this is, again, just to refresh everyone's memory, it's so this is what happens if extensions occur after open enrollment has started, so hopefully November 1st, but before January 1st coverage has taken effect. The key things that we need to do is we need to update the APTC tables. So if we see an extension, we need to make sure that those tables are updated so we could give the proper enhanced premium tax credits. The one consideration there that we're kind of trying to be mindful of, if we see an extension, it's not guaranteed that it's just a continuation of what the EPTC eligibility has been. So when we're updating that table, there could be added complexity if we get a different type of criteria for enhanced premium tax credits. So if it's not just 400% and above get an 8.5% applicable premium percentage, it could be variance. So maybe 600% or below could get EPTCs. It would really depend on what Congress chose to do when they extended those credits. So that's added complexity for us actually updating that. The second thing that we definitely would need to do is test the process. So we'd have to do thorough testing of both the renewal files that we'd be running, and then also to make sure that we were seeing the proper plan display with the updated rates. So there's quite a lot of testing that we need to do to make sure that everything was ready and it was accurate before we would allow the updated applications to go through and the updated renewals to be processed. The next thing that we'd have to do is really review those test results primarily with the renewal runs. So we have a long, lengthy auto renewal cycle. We would really have to kickstart that pretty much from the beginning, do a test run, do a production run, and then allow eligibility to be updated and those enrollments to be followed through upon. And then the very last step we would do at the end of that is send the updated notices and the 834 files. So this would be very confusing for consumers. You know, they're gonna in this scenario, they would have received notices that tell them, hey, this is, you know, you saw on the previous charts how much of an increase each of our consumers are facing with their net premiums. It would really be saying you had that notice, it told you you're going to get, say, 102% increase to your net premium, but there was a change. Now we're going to rerun your eligibility. We're going to, you know, get you a more cost-effective plan with the renewal. So there would be a lot of confusion that we'd have to try to explain away as to why their subsidies are being updated again. So they saw their net premium increase drastically. We'd want to make sure that they're aware that it's going to decrease when we have the rerun eligibility, and we want to make sure that they're really going to their accounts, checking their announcements, checking their secure inboxes, checking their mailbox, and staying as informed as we could keep them. Colleen?
To that end, you know, what is the usage of people going out and looking at their whatever, wherever you send messages within the Pennie site? Like, I guess I'm trying to understand what's push versus what's pull. Like, you know, so what do people have to go out and find for themselves, looking at their account, versus what are we doing proactively to push out messaging?
And so it would be a twofold attack. So we would put up a
Okay.
banner message, but to your point, if they don't go into their account, they won't see it. So we would definitely update our website. We would update the account specific dashboards with banner messages, but really the onus would be on us to make sure that we were sending, you know, if we needed to do an updated postcard, if we needed to do an updated notice, and then definitely what we would do is emails, right? So we would definitely send emails out to make sure that everyone was informed of the change. There's always going to be a certain subset, unfortunately, that wouldn't read those emails or wouldn't, you know, read any communication we send. But the goal would be to over communicate as much as possible through every avenue available to us to make sure we could try to keep everyone informed.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And then for this scenario, the real key considerations to evaluate. So the added complexity would be there'd be a portion of time where we would have to rerun eligibility while people could technically actively shop. And even if we get the shopping component updated as soon as possible so that they're seeing 2026 rates with EPTCs included, there's still it's still a complexity to try to figure out how to segregate the people that actually shop or make changes from the renewal run. Because it's such a large, complicated process, we would need to figure out what the safest option is. So these key considerations that we've listed here, we have not made a decision either way. We just want to bring them to you guys now so that if we do have to make a discussion or have a discussion during an emergency board session, these are the key things we'd be evaluating. So first and foremost, we could technically hide the renewal section for a few days so that consumers could not go in and make changes. So hypothetically, say we got an extension early November and we said, would it make sense to shut down to hide the renewal section within consumers' accounts, maybe, you know, the week of a certain weekend, or maybe for 4 days here. And that way they couldn't make updates. It would kind of be like read-only access. They could see their accounts, they could see their current information. They would get the messaging that, you know, we're currently doing a renewal cycle. You will get updated eligibility, and then you can make a decision at that point. That's probably the safest option that we could present. The safest option would probably be the next one, which is actually closing down the site itself. So basically, we put up a message that says, you know, Congress acted to extend enhanced premium tax credits. As a result, you're not currently able to actively shop because we're renewing your coverage. Be on the lookout on this and this date. We're anticipating sending you the updated notices. And then at that point, you'd be able to come back actively shop and make a change if you wanted to, but first you would see your updated eligibility. The reason this is the safest option is because it restricts how many changes or added complexities we would have. So it's not the best consumer experience because it essentially doesn't let you go and actively enroll in a new plan if you wanted to, even though it's open enrollment, but it would make sure that we would be able to get the renewals completed as soon as possible for all these individuals so that they would at least see the updated eligibility determinations and not have the sticker shock of the non-EPT or non-EPTC rates. Another consideration that we'd have to figure out is really coordinating closely with our insurer partners so that we make sure that that consumers are aware of what these changes would mean for billing and communication. So like hypothetically, what would occur if someone had already, so if there's any billing concerns and they made a payment somehow for January, that would be double what they would pay with the EPTC rates. How we would want to make sure that as much communication is going through with them so that the consumers understand what the downstream effects are for their own billing purposes. Are they given credits towards future months, things like that. So those are discussions we'd want to have if we did see this type of scenario arise. And then the last thing, and this is kind of a theme throughout all of our discussions today, and we'll have more slides on this in the future, but do we add a special enrollment period to allow people to come back and pick a new plan with the updated subsidy? And I think this becomes more and more important the later in the year or the more time that elapses between the start of open enrollment and when we actually see the extension of EPTCs. So before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to pause here. Does anyone have any questions about this specific scenario? Okay, moving on to the next slide. So this is what we're calling scenario 4, and this is a situation where EPTCs are extended, and it's after January 1st. So consumers are already actually potentially utilizing their coverage. They already have an effective date. They've already been renewed with non-EPTC rates, and that coverage has already started. Similar to what we would need to do with the previous scenario is we still need to update the EPTC tables to make sure that the renewals and that active shopping is allowing you to see correct rates. We still need to thoroughly test each of those scenarios and fully test and vet the renewal results, rerun eligibility, process the new enrollments or the new renewed enrollments, and then send the notices, the 834 files, and provide those eligibility determinations to our consumers. Similarly, we also have to figure out how to communicate this complexity to consumers. So we would need to update the renewal notices to explain why their subsidies change. We might need to tweak language from our standard renewal notices. We would also really heavily rely on, to Colleen's point, all types of communication that we have available to us. So we'd want to send emails. We'd want to update all of the features within our dashboards. We'd want to update our website, tell all of our stakeholders like assisters and brokers, here's where we currently stand. Here's our estimate for how long it'll take us to, update all of the renewed eligibility. The key considerations in this one are a little different than the previous scenario. So this is by far the most complex scenario. The reason being because we would have to make some determinations about whether or not we would have retroactive implementation of the EPTCs. And that's very complex if we do backdate those. We would additionally have to figure out, are we going to rebalance APTC? So we currently do that in the system. Would we want to continue doing that going forward with the EPTCs being enhanced or extended? But we'd have to make a lot of those kind of complex decisions. Colleen?
This is clearly not my expertise, but I just wanted to check on the rebalancing or the retroactive. Is that a decision that we would make?
It depends.
Or is it a federal decision?
Most likely the latter, right? So it's most likely the legislation would come through and say effective January 1st, but it would depend on the language. If it's the latter, it's probably out of our hands, right? We would have to be compliant. If it's the former and they don't actually tell us that there's a specific date that they're effective, at that point, those would be the considerations we would have to make.
Okay.
It depends on the language, essentially.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the issue there is that if they make it effective January 1st, you won't be able to update everything likely until into February. So we'd really be talking about that month and what we do with that.
Yeah, I think the other piece too, if there is some sort of retroactive, how does that work from a carrier perspective with billing, right? Like we're gonna bill in December for January premiums, you know, say we billed somebody $150, but then post subsidy, what they really owe is 50. So, each carrier, because of the process, the way the process is supposed to work, is supposed to do delinquency notices, things along those lines come, January. So that's some of the questions we have too, is what if somebody pays what they think they owe and not what we've billed, and it's not, that could lead to some complexities on the carrier side of things too.
Yeah, and that's a very good call out. That's so that third bullet point we have under the key consideration is kind of how do we even coordinate to make sure our communications are in line too. So, the insurers would, with your complexity, we would need to be completely apprised of that and then have a communications plan that was coordinated to make sure that it was as understandable as possible for our consumers, understanding that this is a very complex scenario. So that adds to the complexity of this situation if this does happen. Obviously, we'd still be happy because people would be getting EBTCs and we'd continue with our higher enrollments, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is operationally very complex for us. It's complex for our insurer partners. It's very difficult for the assisters and brokers to try to explain this to consumers. And then ultimately, and most importantly, our consumers would be very confused because we would have to we've had continuous messaging saying these are expiring, and then all of a sudden we have to pivot rapidly to say, well, the good news is they were extended. Here's what it means, but here's where the other wrinkles, like with your billing, this is what's going on with that situation.
Yeah. Is there any, I know you talked about communications directly to consumers, but will there also be outreach like to media outlets and things like that to ideally get, okay, I see Devin shaking her head. Like, I just want to make sure that we can get on TV, radio, like other, so it's more of like a global blasting, especially if we're turning, Penny off for a time period, or, as far as transactions are concerned, that people understand, it's not like, back in 2014 where everything was shut down because, healthcare.gov wasn't ready. I don't want people to think it's like that there's a system issue on our end, that it's more so us having to react to, kind of the breaking information.
It's easier for me to answer because I'm the operations guy, just keeping the dark corner. But I could say I think Chachi, Devin, and Jennifer would probably be doing a full court press to make sure that we had those press releases and as much visibility as possible.
Yeah, and we would really pull on stakeholders as well. What can you guys do? Who can, whatever megaphone you have,
Yep.
we
Okay.
need to shout it out for sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it would
good
be
to
a
know.
full
Okay.
full court bliss.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
And then Amy, I see your hands up.
Yeah, can you explain what you mean by what rebalancing APTC here?
Yeah, so currently
context?
how this system works is if someone were to, so we rebalance when we do an eligibility determination. So say hypothetically someone came in March, usually, and they updated their income and it was a different amount than what they had previously had. We rebalance their APTC to try to recoup so that their year-end premium tax credit amount is the correct amount, as close as possible. So if you updated your application and say your income was now lower, you would get more APTC than you had before. The converse of that's the more difficult situation. If you said your income was higher, the system goes and says, well, then you were receiving too much APTC for January, February, and March. And as a result, we're going to slightly decrease your APTC for the months going forward so that you do not get reconciled at tax time, so that we're going to get you to the correct amount of premium tax credits based off of your updated annual income. And that'll be reflected here. Why it matters in the EPTC world is because if we saw this extension, the pot of premium tax credits that they could have gotten increases rather impressively, right? So if it was originally they were, say, eligible for $500 for the entire year for premium tax credits, but if enhanced premium tax credits are extended and it becomes 1,000, we have to figure out how to make sure that they're made whole with that. So the consideration is there an advantage to having an increased amount of APTC that they increase each month to try to cover the back payment that they had to make, which was larger, out of their own pocket. And it's a consideration that we'd have to consider, but I will say it's not the simplest process to implement. We did this with when enhanced premium tax credits were implemented in the first place through ARPA, and there were a lot of complexities that had to be resolved in order to clean that up properly. So we want to have that discussion thoroughly to make sure that we were all on the same page with what we thought was the best route forward.
Okay, so then when you say here, when you talk about prospective EPTCs, that doesn't necessarily include rebalancing.
No, and so
Could. Okay.
Probably poor authorship on my part. I apologize for that. Yeah, so basically these are so it's backdating versus prospective, and then also if prospective is rebalance included is, I guess, the best way to summarize
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the other thing that we would have to consider too in this scenario, which adds further complexity, is if we were to see an extension sometime within January, we also would be behind the scenes running a very complex job, which is generating the 1095As that are sent to consumers. So that's another further wrinkle. It does take up, it's a lot of time to actually run this process. We've already started, believe it or not, the process right now. We don't start it within the system until later on, but we've actually already started planning for it because it is so complex. So if we had to do a second renewal run at the same time as the 1095A generation, that is added complexity, and it does tie up some resources that are normally already fully dedicated to 1095As. And then the last piece of complexity, obviously, is open enrollment would be ending. So as Devin mentioned earlier, if we saw an extension, say January 1st, that's fantastic, but it's going to take us at least a month to get the renewal cycle. And that's if we're very lucky with no issues. It would take another month probably to get the renewal job completed. So as a result, we'd be approaching the end of open enrollment by the time we got the updated APTC or EPTC. We'd be past the end of open enrollment actually by the time we got the updated EPTC renewals sent out. So this is unequivocally the most complex of our scenarios. If we do run into this situation, obviously we'd want to communicate very closely with the board and have an emergency board meeting and then kind of go through these key considerations. And we'd provide recommendations at that time based off of what the legislative package looked like. Colleen?
So on the communication side of things, I know we're talking about what Penny's going to do proactively, but are there requirements as well on the carriers from a communication perspective? Like we have renewal notification requirements. We've never really been in a scenario like this before. So trying to understand too what the obviously we want to communicate with people, make sure that they understand, but just trying to understand from our, the carrier side of things, are there required notifications? Are there timing for those notifications that are required to be sent, things like that? Because, we've discussed in the past some of the safe harbor stuff around this because we didn't want to be communicating, really rich subsidies if they aren't going to be available for January 1. But also would like to understand with these different scenarios, if we're pushing out stuff from a Penny perspective, as far as communications, what does that mean for carrier notifications?
Yeah, and it's a fantastic question. Unfortunately, I don't think we have a clear-cut answer. So, I mean, it would be up to the insurers with how it's almost how closely do you want to rely on the existing communications requirements, but for a second scenario that's never been contemplated, right? So would you try to do the same communications that you would do before auto renewals were completed or before open enrollment started, but for this second juncture? But ultimately, I don't think we could provide that type of advice. I think it would really be the insurers would have to make some decisions there. Now, I do think we could take that question back and figure out if there's some recommendations that we could have, and then hopefully get all the insurers so that we're in a kind of an organized structure for how we're doing the communications plans. But unfortunately, I don't think we have an answer today, but we will take that back, Colleen, and see if there's any further light we could shed on it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about these scenarios? All right, hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Policy, David Thompson, so that he could go through some of the other considerations based off of these complex scenarios and what else we would have to consider, whether or not these EBTCs are extended, understanding the state of confusion that we're in. Are there other proactive measures we can take? So David, turn over to you.
Thanks, Rob. So yes, as Rob mentioned, I'm going to walk through some of our other contingency options for discussion here. Kind of zooming out a little bit, really our job as Pennsylvania's state-based marketplace is to kind of parse through the noise and focus on what is most important for our customers, for Pennsylvanians, and then to ensure that we are communicating accurately to the people who rely on us for health coverage to ensure that they are able to make the best decisions for themselves and for their families. And so it's in that vein that we are, putting these forward. So as Rob mentioned, changes that are made after, during a certain period of time will just, we're in an environment that's obviously not business as usual, a lot of uncertainty, and, any changes made now will, don't really fall within the typical open enrollment timelines. And we are very cognizant of anything that we send to our customers around this time could, that especially something that ends up being out of date or not correct, could have a very adverse impact on them and ultimately our ability to retain people for coverage. So in that vein, we wanted to put forward a couple of one-time proposals for open enrollment 2026 only, but that we believe would provide customers, with the additional time to shop that they might need in order to make the right decision, given the potential loss of benefits and all the confusion around the Affordable Care Act and everything going on. So the first one, kind of right off the bat, is to allow for a proactive extension of open enrollment through the end of January. And then to have any coverage that someone enrolls, between January 15th and January 31st, having a coverage effective date of February 1st. We believe that this will ensure that Pennie customers have an adequate amount of time to understand, and us the ability to provide the correct information of what premium changes are coming to them, and then to enable them to understand what's going on and then shop for, a different plan, or, at least if they want to stay enrolled in their current plan, to be armed with the correct information in order to make the right decision. It also would give us additional time to process. We're expecting a lot more calls, more customer escalations, and a need to provide enhanced customer support across all communication channels, contact center, obviously with our brokers, assisters, and insurers. And we want to ensure that we are able to accommodate everyone who needs additional support, throughout this very confusing process. So that's kind of the first thing that we wanted to put out, is just, we're in a topsy-turvy world, and having through the end of January would really give us, we believe, give our customers the ability to really fully understand their options and make the right decision. All right, so we will now quickly move to
David?
Cheryl.
Can I ask one
You go.
question? This is Cheryl. I'm sure the answer to this is no, and I should know the answer to it, but are there any federal limits on our ability to extend open enrollment at all? Are there any prohibitions or?
Not for this year. We have, well, I'll let Anna, it looks like you might raise your hand, but we have, and the regulations are changing for 2027. Those are things that we're talking about actively, but for 26, there are no such restrictions on state-based marketplace.
Yep, that's
Thanks.
correct. We're looking into that issue, and for this year, we can do it.
Thanks.
Okay, so I believe now we're going to quickly move into executive session to talk about the next open enrollment contingency proposal.
So the board members will be asked to drop from this meeting, move over to executive session, and then we will come back as soon as that's done to this session. The purpose of executive session to talk about legal matters, legal advice, legal issues in this case, and we'll come back to public session as soon as we can. So thank you all, and we will be back. All right, we are back in public session. The recording has started back up. We can just go jumping right back in, I think, to David and Jennifer.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. So can we move to slide 19, please? Okay. So we had, in addition to potentially extending open enrollment, or a proposal to extend open enrollment through the end of January, we had a few other special enrollment periods we wanted to discuss. I guess before doing that, we'll provide a quick summary. In the executive session, we discussed potentially, if Congress extends the enhanced premium tax credit in some fashion. We in the last week of October, so between October 24th and October 31st, we discussed potentially pausing the start of open enrollment and starting November 10th as opposed to November 1st. This would give us the opportunity to pause the pause the renewal process and ensure that our system was providing accurate information for people who came back into our system to look at their plans. This would provide customers with accurate information. So if they did, enroll or in a new plan or shop or otherwise do anything with their application, they would get the correct eligibility determination in their account, as well as accurate information regarding advanced premium tax credits and cost sharing reductions. So we had a good discussion and executive decision on that, but it's really about a contingency if in the very real possibility that Congress acts after October 24th and before November 1st. Okay. Now I think we can move on. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So so we have a few other special enrollment periods that we want to discuss. First one is high volume SEP. This would be a new special enrollment period that would allow Pennie to extend the December 15th deadline for January 1st coverage if we receive consistently high volumes of calls, of complaints, of escalations up throughout November and early December. What we're proposing would we would add a week or we would basically have a broad-based exceptional circumstance that would allow us to extend the deadline date for January 1st coverage potentially through or until December 22nd. If you recall, every other year we had in place a series of broad-based exceptional circumstances that allow Pennie to trigger a deadline day extension either on December 15th or January 15th if we have if certain call volumes are met on a deadline day, or we have a system outage or something like it. What we're asking for here is enhanced flexibility to say it's looking like we're getting a flood of calls and people are having issues, and again, given the uncertainty of where we are, we're looking at a lot of increased volume. We're having a hard time dealing with it potentially. We think that it would benefit, we'd see a meaningful benefit for our customers by extending that 12/15 deadline to 12/22 for coverage effective January 1st. So we would not make that public until until late December 15th or early December 16th. We would be driving towards that 12/15 deadline, but we would give customers the ability to have more time to shop for that January 1st effective date, and it would enable us to, if we to adequately address people's concerns. Okay,
David, just a question. Why don't we do that already? Like why I know some states you can sign up as late as 12:30 and still have 1/1 coverage. Like why wouldn't we just ordinarily extend it at least to the 22nd? I mean, still gives them operationally a week to get it set up, but do you remember why?
I think we would take up through December 31st for Jan 1 coverage. When we set it up, as we talked about, the regulations apply 15-16 rules for open enrollment. So when we were set up, we wanted to adhere to that. In the past, we've heard, we know that, that gives, there are concerns, have been discussed in the past, of the implications for insurers for butting up against, for extending the January 1st deadline. So we wanted to be cognizant of that. I will say that we have triggered an extension of the 12/15 deadline a couple of times in our history. But it is, we're anticipating higher call volumes across the board, I think, this year. So this would give us enhanced flexibility, but we would absolutely take, love as much flexibility as we can have to have a later effective date or a later, oh my gosh, deadline day for January 1st coverage.
Question from Amy. Thanks, David.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking along the same lines in terms of like why not always have this, but I think if we do decide to take up, maybe regardless of whether we decide to take up the November, the extending or delaying the start of open enrollment, I think doing this kind of SEP makes sense, but I actually don't think we have to make an SEP. I think the regulations support state-based marketplaces using an open enrollment, just extending open enrollment, and which would be cleaner. We don't have to worry about call volumes. There's no justification. And I think I would favor doing it to the end of the month. That way, especially if we have this delayed start, people really get as much time as possible to get a January 1st effective date.
Colleen?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. If we do have the delayed start, I think a 12/31 deadline, in an ideal world, people start with the right plan on January 1st, and we can get billing corrected as quickly as possible for any of the consumers that are renewing policies. So I think allowing for that extra time will make sure that we get them in the right plan. Because if they had made a different choice or whatever it may be, it gives us an opportunity to just get everybody in the plan they want to be in for January 1st. If we allow up until the 31st. I don't know the rules around whether we have to have an SEP or not, but in whatever mechanism we're able to do that, I think that would be a good thing. As far as the reason why, from at least this carrier's perspective, why this is, why it's difficult in a normal year to always have, a deadline of December 31st, that just means the member's not going to have a card in hand and they're not going to be, likely be billed the right premium. And then you're kind of playing catch up with the consumer expectations, because it takes time. If we don't get the transaction until the 31st, we've got to process that transaction and be able to generate then that ID card out to people. So in an optimal world, the 15th deadline allows time for the billing, the ID card, everything to, so that people can actually be effectuated with their policy as of January 1st and begin to use it the first day of coverage. But we do have extenuating circumstances this year, and I think this would make sense if we have a delayed start to open enrollment. or if there are other late breaking extensions of the APTCs after open enrollment starts.
I'll have,
Then what-
I don't know if Anna Polina has anything to jump in on the SEP versus, OEP rules, but it sounds like there might be openness from the board to have this extended actually through 12/31 for 1/1 coverage start. And maybe just having that set up for this year, agnostic to the high volumes aspect, but I just wanted to open that up for discussion.
Yes, under the regs, we could extend the open enrollment period, and we can also extend the effective date as well.
Sounds like there's appetite for us extending the 12/15 deadline. So is that support contingent on us opening late, or or is there support in this, given where we are this year, at least, extending that 12/15 deadline to ensure that more people can have a full year of coverage?
Yeah, to me, David, given the uniqueness of this year, I would be supportive of this year's policy allowing enrollment up till 12/31 for 1/1 coverage, regardless of whether we extend or delay open enrollment. I think because of the amount of information that's coming out, and the challenges that individuals are having, at least right now, and we'll see what clarity we get over the next 14 days. But I think it makes sense to give them that every bit of last minute to make coverage decisions for 12 or for 1/1. How does the board feel? Do we want to go ahead and proactively allow enrollment to 12/31 regardless, or do you want to try to tie it to other decisions that we may make? Do we want to go through all of these contingencies first and then circle back to see where we want to go?
I think it makes sense to decouple them. In other words, considering that one standalone, considering the different options standalone.
Okay. David, let's briefly go through all of them and then we'll circle back and go through them and we can decide what we want to do.
Sounds good. So the next one is we're calling the high premium SEP. So this SEP would be available for current Pennie enrollees. So that is enrollees who had 2025 coverage that were renewed or eligible to be renewed, who call us indicating that the premium is too high. So what we mean by that is they have a net premium increase of 50% or greater by the end of February. And that would provide them a 60-day special enrollment period to change plans. So I guess the three important things here are: one has to have current 2025 coverage as of today. Two has to have a net premium increase of 50% or greater. And three has to actively call in to us by the end of February. And this could apply whether EPTC is extended or not. Some counties, year over year, people do have net premium increases that high. In a normal year, it's rare, but it happens. So this would again be a contingency plan to shield or to give customers the opportunity to shop for a different plan if they pay their January 1st premium and realize that they can't afford it.
Colleen, questions about this one?
Yeah, this one, I guess I just want to make sure, what would be the effective date? If I waited until February 28th, what would be the effective date of my plan change?
March 1st.
So it would be March 1st, not March 15th.
Right.
Or,
So if
sorry,
you
not
call-
April 1st, because
Right.
if you, typically, if you're enrolling at the end of the month, I know we talked about something special for January 1st, but typically if somebody doesn't enroll until February 28th, their effective date would be April the 1st.
So for our SCP rules are different than our open
They are.
enrollment rules. So SCP rules, you get it's first of the month effective date unless there's the birth, unless you're adding or removing a dependent from coverage, then it's the day of. But
That's
otherwise,
for every SCP?
every SCP. That's
Okay.
been that way for a couple of years.
Okay, I may have missed that, so sorry. Okay, all right. I guess I just worry with this one. I appreciate the sentiment of this, but I worry that people aren't going to be able to pay their January or February. So by giving them something that's effective March 1st and they still have to pay 2 months of premium that they couldn't afford, how many people are really going to be able to afford those first 2 months in order to be able to have continuous coverage, and be able to pay the lower premium for March?
Antoinette?
Yeah, so Colleen hits a little bit on my question too. So to take a step back, is this for everyone, or I stayed in my current plan and then I realized it's too expensive, or I pick a new plan and realized it was too expensive, and then how do we deal with all of like if I paid Independence Blue Cross, but then I decided that plan's too expensive and I switched somewhere completely new, like how does that all logistically work, I guess?
So, I mean, I think those are great questions. I think we could define it however we wanted to, but we would say you had to have an active 2025 coverage. You had to be renewed into it. You have to still be in it. You couldn't have changed your plan, because if you change your plan, then presumably you've had adequate time to shop. So you'd have to be in that renewed plan in order for this to apply.
Amy?
I think you may have said this, just to clarify. So it's for people who are auto renewed only, right? They've just sort of rolled into their new plan, maybe weren't paying attention, and suddenly have sticker shock. Okay, thank you.
And I know this is on the circle back list, but at least 2 weeks are addressed by the first proposal that we'll talk about extending OEP just generally to the end of January. I know this goes to the end of February, but one of our decision points is going to be just extending from January 1 to January 15, or 15 to 30, or end of January.
Yes.
Alexis.
Sorry.
Well, I think that's what I was about to ask is why aren't we talking about January, but you're saying that's covered in a different thing? Because I could see a world where if that we supported that and we supported the high volume SEP at the top of this page, maybe we didn't get into the rest or didn't need it. So I don't know if it's the sequencing with which we're going to go through these and vote. I guess I'm giving some indication that I'm not sure a 60-day, the high premium or the late EPTC is necessary if we do the other things.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too, Alexis. All right. David, why don't you just explain the last one really quickly? And then, I mean, to the point that we've just been discussing, we'll circle back up.
Yep. So the late EPTC SEP refers to, okay, so we've talked about what happens if something happens through the end of October. This is a scenario where we're in November, we're in December. We know that members of Congress, at least many of them, believe that they have till midnight, December 31st, to extend EPTC. And there is a realistic chance that things happen in late November and in December. In which case, all of the operational complexities that we just talked about, they're magnified, even further. So we would have the eligibility and enrollment, I guess would then be inaccurate information out there. Customers would already have made their plan decisions based on that information and everything in our system. We would have to obviously, make the system accommodations to provide the correct eligibility in the system. And then we would have to tell all of our customers that, hey, just kidding, it was extended, come back and see what you're eligible for. So this SEP we're talking about a 60-day SEP after the end of open enrollment that would start the day after open enrollment, or potentially 60 days after the date that we update our eligibility, or we can talk about the operational aspect of it. But this is really to say, like, if this happens during open enrollment, we would have to rerun eligibility, update our system, and then update our notices, and then communicate with all of our customers that what they might have acted on previously was not the latest and greatest, and try to get them to come back. So 60 days we wouldn't really need all of that time to update our system, and then to let folks know, and hope that people would to let people know, and that's again in the very real possibility that it's December 18th and Congress decides, okay, now we're going to extend. So that's what this is about.
Okay, so we have a number of open issues ahead of us regarding the start of open enrollment, the end of open enrollment, and everything special in between. I think, to me, what I was thinking is that might be one of the cleanest, and I think the late EPTC SEP in particular, David, strikes me as something that if EPTs are extended sometime after November 1, the board is going to have to meet via emergency meeting. So that one strikes me as something that we could address at that meeting. But I think today, I think we need to set the parameters of what our expectations are for the timelines of open enrollment. And before the front end of open enrollment, to me, and I would probably go as far as February 15th for March 1 coverage, but I think we should extend open enrollment to at least the end of January. And I think instead of a high volume SEP, to the conversation point we had earlier, I think you should be able to enroll up until December 31 for January 1 coverage. Now that's completely separate from the starting point. And I think we mentioned that, and Joel mentioned that earlier, that I think we can have these conversations separate. But that's where I think, given the challenges of the circumstances that we're facing today and the confusion that consumers are going to walk into, because my fear is the individuals that somewhat follow it, but they're auto enrolled into now a premium that's 365% higher than it was. They don't really see that until it gets pulled out of their paycheck or their auto payment. They got the notices maybe, but they look past it. So now you're midway through December and their first premium payment has been pulled out. Then you're into January, the second one gets pulled out. Maybe they didn't notice the first one got pulled out. But now the second one, it's after the holidays. They looked, it's like, oh gosh, like this is far more than I can afford. I think we should have an opportunity for individuals to come in and to continue shopping, giving everything that's changing and just the vast increases that they're going to see if EPTCs go away. Would certainly want to hear where everybody feels on. Let's skip the when you start conversation first and almost do it backwards of like where
If I could jump
what
in
do we
quick.
think?
Tanya, can you please move to the next slide? And Commissioner, just based on what you were talking about here, I'm dropping two motions into the chat, and they're both related to the deadlines that we'd be looking at for open enrollment. So I think our recommendation, just based on the conversation here and also our pre-planning, is that we would move for both of these to be voted on and approved by the board today, and then we can jump into the start of open enrollment.
Okay, so the first motion that's recommended to us is to authorize Pennie to extend the open enrollment period to January 31 with a coverage effective date of February 1. How do folks think about that?
I can support or make that motion, either one.
I guess
This is Cheryl's second.
I guess I was gonna make a comment, I guess, before we started voting, but I guess from our perspective, people are deadline driven. So like no matter what deadline you make, that's when you're going to see the activity. So the more we push it out, the further we push out people taking activity. That then leads to further billing issues, especially if the premiums are too high, because the effective date just keeps pushing out for them and they still are going to have to satisfy the premiums that if they didn't take action at the beginning of open enrollment. So that's my concern. If we begin to push out the end of open enrollment, if we look at this, it's extended through, this we would say February 1st, I guess, but they would still have to satisfy that January premium. If we pushed it out into February, or we're saying then the effective date is March, like then they have 2 months of the too high premium that they'd have to satisfy before they would get to the premium that they're able to pay. Like, that I think we just have to consider that too. We may think we're doing consumers a favor here, but what really does them the best good is if they're able to make their change for January 1st and they start January 1st in the policy they want to have for the full year at ideally a premium that they can afford.
Yeah, and I think the Pet and Chachi, correct me if I'm wrong, or Devin, like the messaging to your point, Colleen, is always those early deadlines. Like I don't envision if we extend it today, January 31st, going out and advertising that you have until January 31st to enroll in coverage until we're after January 15th.
It would be probably a little bit before January 15th, but we always push the December 15th deadline. We would make sure that our stakeholders, brokers, assisters, legislators, insurers, everyone would know that it was getting extended, but we would let them know publicly from a consumer's perspective, they're only going to see us pushing December 15th, and then probably not until after the holidays when everyone kind of pokes their head back up after the holiday rush. We remember we did the same thing 2 years ago whenever we extended it past Martin Luther
It's like
King
Martin
Jr.
Luther
Day.
King Day.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll probably follow that same pattern where we announce it maybe I think the first is on a Friday, so we would announce it that Monday or Tuesday coming back after the first.
And Chachi or Devin, you may remember this better than I do. I think we saw volume dip in that extended week. Like it wasn't as though people took advantage and the volume jumped from the 15th to the 22nd, I think, but they had the flexibility to continue and enroll there, is how I remember how that played out, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I would say it shifted because we really didn't see volume on Monday, which was the 15th, but we saw quite a lot of activity kind of throughout that week. But there was more of like, we did see higher volumes earlier than we normally do before a deadline. So I think we overall got more enrollment because some people came in close to 115 and others who knew they had more time came in after that. So
Okay.
I think overall it allowed us to get more.
Yeah. Any other discussion of the first one? And that would be to authorize the extension of open enrollment to January 31st with a coverage effective date of February 1st.
Sorry, Mike, just to jump in there, I had a quick clarification. We also just wanted to add to that it's essentially an extension of the deadline. So for any QHP selection after January 1, they would receive that February 1 effective date.
What did I say? I
No,
thought
we
that's
just
what we were
wanted to
talking
add
about.
that clarification to the first motion.
Sorry, say it. Can you say it again, Jennifer? Sorry.
Yeah, so essentially the two motions are shifting the deadline for plan selection to get first of the month coverage. So we're looking to shift the December 15th deadline to December 31st for January 1st coverage. And we're looking to shift the January 15th deadline to January 31st for February 1st coverage. That's what the two motions are clarifying.
We were going one at a time though, Jennifer. I wanted to do the extension first, so just the clean extension, and then we'll come back to December 15th versus 31st. Just for ease of kind of understanding what we're voting on each time. The first motion we'd be looking for, is it the revised one you just put in, Jennifer? So it would be to authorize Pennie to extend the open enrollment period to January 31 and making the effective coverage date February 1 for QHP selection made on or after January 1.
Joel Hopkins, I'll make that motion.
This is
Joel?
Cheryl. I'll second.
Cheryl already seconded. Yep. Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Again, it's just the extension to January 31. All right. Well, then we'll all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so the second piece would be the part of the discussion that we were just talking about because of the complexity of this year, because of the uniqueness just of this year. And we can revisit this, I think, next year as a future policy discussion, but we talked about this year authorizing Pennie to make the effective coverage date. Nope, that's not right. Oh, yes. January 1, 2026 for QHP selections made between the first day of open enrollment and December 31st. So this motion would let you buy coverage up until December 31st and have that apply January 1 versus December 15th. And I think we talked about that earlier, Colleen, about kind of just with everything going on, just being able to kind of get that 1/1 coverage as quickly or as possible.
I'll motion on that one.
And again, just for this year. So Colleen will motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Amy.
Amy seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. So I think that brings us back to the discussion on the front end of what we want to do with the start of open enrollment. And David, can you quickly kind of highlight the options that we're looking at again and focus on the Pennie recommendation as well?
Sure. So Tanya, if you could flip back to slide 18. So our Pennie's recommendation is that if Congress acts after October 24th and before November 1st, Pennie delays the start of open enrollment from November 1st to November 10th. That's really what we're looking at. This delay would allow us to avoid sending inaccurate eligibility and renewal notices that could potentially cause massive sticker shock and cause, many customers, thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands maybe, to not renew, not come back in, not shop, And our goal is to have as little customer abrasion as humanly possible. We could update our system during this time to reflect the accurate information. So our recommendation is if Congress acts after October 24th and before November 1st to delay the start of open enrollment to November 10th.
Okay, now let's discuss that one. And again, I mean, the purpose and I think all of our goals is to avoid sticker shock to the extent we can. And I think we all recognize that it's going to be difficult to get somebody back once we lose them. So somebody that comes online, sees the premium is more than they can afford, they leave. They don't think they have a reason to come back to Penny again to check to see that something changes, even if they read in the news that tax credits were extended or whatnot. Recognizing this is a challenge for everyone in the process, from Penny to PID, because we're going to have to look at the rates changing, getting them over to Penny, insurers to get information back out. Interested in thoughts generally here.
I mean, I'll just say, I think it's important, just as you stated, that people have accurate information. So the best way to do that is to delay open enrollment. I think that's what's best for the consumer, because I am worried that people will see the number, the sticker shock, and, they will just, turn it off and not turn it back on again.
And do people feel comfortable on that today? Do you need more time? I mean, theoretically, we could come back in 2 weeks in an emergency board meeting, but I don't know what that does to Devin, to the operation side. If we straw poll, yes, this is where we're leaning if nothing happens as of December 31st, or not December 31st, sorry, October 31st, but then come back to like sign off on it. Does that cause you more concern or more challenge for Penny, or is it basically like where we'd be headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were hoping that a vote today would sort of give some indication that this could happen, so there could be some planning. And so if we waited, we would lose that sort of automatic trigger that people would be able to rely on.
Commissioner, given the pretty robust discussion and a lot of the feedback from people who really understand this, I am comfortable moving forward with the vote on this today.
This is Cheryl. I am as well.
All right. Anyone else have any additional comment? So then the motion that it sounds like folks that the board is generally supportive of is to authorize Penny to delay the start of open enrollment to November 10th if the EPTCs are extended just in that 1 week period between 10/24 through 10/31. So if they're extended in the last week of October, the idea would be open enrollment starts November 1 instead of November 10 in order to make sure that Penny has the accurate information, the accurate tax credit information posted when people log in to look at their options. Do we have a motion? Oh, go ahead, Devin.
Just to clarify, we intend to include 10/24 in that. The dates are a little, like, we mean inclusive of 10/24.
Oh, yeah. So not David's comment in the text. Okay, so between 10/24, including 10/24 through 10/31, if it's extended any of those days, it would bump to November 10th.
This is Antoinette. I'll make the motion.
Twinette moves. Do we have a second?
Alexis, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. I think that is all, at least for now, the decision points on that piece, and we can get back to the regular agenda, which rolls us into the call. Wait, oh, it rolls us into a break. We're about an hour late for a break.
Sorry, Mike.
How about we take?
Sorry, we just had one more thing. So on the couple of flexibilities that David presented on, I know there was some discussion on the high premium SEP and then the late extension of EPTC's SEP. We did want to put forward, I guess, for consideration, if the board would delegate the authority to enact either of those to the Pennie organization, or if there would need to be an emergency board meeting should one of those scenarios happen to enact those policies.
Okay. My thought, and board members, feel free to weigh in, was that if it's extended after November 1, we're meeting in emergency session and we can address those as part of emergency session. But if we want to tackle those now, we can do that too.
This is Antoine. I just have a question on the high premium SEP. Is that only if the tax credits are extended late, or is that an SEP we would do regardless of what happens? I think that changes.
That's
the
something that could be
conversation.
decided. Yeah. That could be enacted regardless of the late extension of EPTCs.
So I guess the question for Devin and everyone is then you would probably need an answer on that sooner rather than later, because we wouldn't come back unless we had to have an emergency session.
Well, the high premium SEP specifically is, it's going to apply to more people in the event that EPTC is not extended. So, but it could apply in any scenario where someone has a 50% or greater net premium increase. But so our recommendation is to move forward with that SEP. It would be most, it would be most impactful. More people would see that type of premium increase if EPTC is not extended.
Right. Yep, that makes sense.
Okay, Alexis.
I guess on that one, I would just feel like that warrants more conversation than we are ready to have today, because I feel like that takes us to a pre-pandemic, pre-EPTC world, which is the foundation of Pennie to begin with. And I'm not sure why we would, in this moment, say, yeah, let's go ahead and extend into, March coverage. It doesn't make sense to me to have that conversation right now. I feel like we've addressed the concerns at hand with the votes we've made.
Other thoughts or questions?
All right, it's Colleen. I would have concerns on that one too. I mean, I think we've already voted to extend open enrollment to the end of January. We're providing 2 extra weeks. I do have concerns if people can't pay the premium that they're not going to be able to satisfy, 2 months of additional premium plus that. I don't know that we're creating a scenario that actually supports the consumer if they're not able to pay. I think we need to make sure that we're doing the outreach, as much outreach as possible so that they can get into the right plan for January 1st so that so we've extended to January, through December 31st for January coverage. We've extended through January 31st for February 1 coverage. I think that is, in my mind, it's a difficult situation, but pushing out how many more months somebody has to pay the higher premium, I don't think is in the consumer's best interest. I think the best interest of the consumer is to get them into the right plan for January 1st.
This is Joel Hopkins. I'd agree with that and suggest that we table a decision on that.
Anyone else? Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess that means that we are having an emergency session no matter what then. So we need to decide how long we're going to table this discussion. Because if the EPTCs aren't extended, this has got to come up. If they are extended, then we have other issues. So seems like we have to schedule something. Is that right?
Yeah, I anticipate that we will be meeting in emergency session. I don't know, Devin, if we should just go ahead and after this meeting, start planning it out. Or if we want to wait until we see action one way or the other. I guess early November or mid-November would be fine until you run into the holiday.
Yeah,
What do you think on timing?
Yeah, I think by early December, we would have a sense of what impacts we're already seeing if it's not extended. So we could potentially do something like early mid-December with that information, which could inform the high premium step. And if a late extension is still on the table, that could also inform the late EBTC step as well.
So why don't we go ahead and start at least tentatively finding some opportunities that would work for a board meeting.
If we can do that.
And then we will move into skip. Do we want to skip a break or do people need 10 minutes to stretch their legs? I could go either way.
I could
I'm
use,
going to take
I could
5.
use 3. Yeah, I could use 5.
Let's take 12. Let's come back at 2:40. So we'll take a quick break and see you soon. All right, we are back to it after the break. It is 2:40, and let's just jump right in, and I will kick it back to, I think, Rob to talk us through, or Jen to talk us through the call center proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'll just open up this section. So now we're going to move into the portion of this meeting where we're talking through a contact center proposal that we're bringing to you all today. And then we'll also close with our calendar year 2026 budget. And just one note on this proposal, I mean, given all of the uncertainty going into next year, we have been looking at our budget and some of our largest line items to see where we can save money while also maintaining quality. And so Rob Schobert is going to be bringing a proposal here to you today as we look to the future of our call center. Rob?
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So in March, we discussed how we are facing kind of a pivotal moment in the evolution of Pennie's operations, and that's really deciding which path we're going to take forward with our contact center. So I'm going to give a summary of the evaluation that we carried out over these last 6 months, as well as our recommendation. But I want to note that our proposal to transition the contact center operations in-house isn't really just about cost savings. It's also about building a resilient, mission-driven capability that reflects our values and prepares us for the future. So we think this is the best way to really make sure that we have greater control over our quality, like Jennifer mentioned, as well as transparency and agility. And we especially think that this will be helpful during all the federal uncertainty and changes that we've been encountering. So we've modeled the financials, and we really looked at all the staffing scenarios and built a roadmap that honors both our vendor partnerships that we've been having, but also positions us for long-term maturity. So this isn't just a tactical shift. I do want to point out this is kind of a strategic investment where we're really focusing on the goals that we've been articulating in each of these board meetings and highlighting that we're trying to focus on consumer trust, operational excellence, and organizational stability. So to walk through just a refresher from March, if you recall that we have 3 options that we're really looking at. The first is whether we want to extend our contract with Get Insured, and we have up to 3 option years to do so. So our contract runs through December 31st, 2026. For contact center purposes, we could extend either 1 or 3 option years, so we could go 2027, 2028, or 2029. This would be probably the easiest approach. It preserves operational continuity and it avoids a complex transition, but it comes with less flexibility and control over our structure, as well as the long-term strategy and costs that come with the contact center. Option 2 would be building an internal contact center. So this comes with the maximum amount of control, flexibility, and alignment with our mission. But it also gives us direct oversight over training, quality, governance, performance management, and policy implementation. And furthermore, it also gives us the highest ability to contain costs and change our budget as necessary should the need arise based on federal uncertainties. But this one does come with transition costs, and there is a complex transition plan that requires a high level of effort by our team and then additional staff to help us actually stand up the contact center. And then option 3 would be issuing a request for proposal for this. So we have a lot of lessons learned. We have a lot of knowledge internally that we could utilize to structure an RFP. But this would be kind of beholden to a narrow vendor market. So there's not many vendors in this space. And then theoretically, it could come with cost savings and improved quality, but it could also be the inverse. We could also see, based off the bids that we received, the potential for actually increased costs. So the next slide shows us a high-level comparison, kind of what the key line items that we evaluated were. So in terms of existing cost structure, option 2, the internal contact center, would come with the lowest cost based on the analysis that we did. And it comes with the highest flexibility. So Pennie would be able to increase or decrease the cost to align with our enrollment levels as well as our strategic aims. Option 1, we know what those costs are, so we're well aware of what they would be. It's very much structured. It's not as up for debate what those costs would be. And option 3 is kind of the great unknown because it could be lower or higher depending on what vendor proposals would have been. In terms of risk for implementation, the lowest risk and the lowest effort, again, is option 1 because of the fact that we would just be continuing with our current vendor. The highest risk and highest effort would be option 2 because it does require a 2-year implementation plan, and those include transition costs. Option 3 also would potentially include transition costs and a 2-year implementation plan. So that's at least a medium risk, and it's a large effort as well. In terms of overall control over quality, cost control, flexibility, and scalability, option 2 is the highest level, and then options 1 and 3 are, there's potential there, but they're not necessarily, they're more limited than what would be with direct command and control over the contact center. And then ultimately, in terms of strategic flexibility, because we'd be able to set our own mission statement, our own goals, and align all of our quality efforts and performance management efforts to those goals, the highest strategic flexibility comes with option 2. So the next slide goes furthermore into kind of a high level pros and cons. With option 1, I mean, Get Insured's been great at getting us to this point. It's, we've had a very good working relationship and partnership with them over the 5 years. We're also hoping to have one through 2026 and 2027 as well. And they are great at speed to answer, and they have very low abandonment rates. It would be very easy in terms of implementing option 1 because it's just continuity. So there wouldn't be many, transition disruptions that would come with that. But in terms of the cons, again, we're looking as we mature as an organization to have more kind of strategic control. So maintaining option 1 would come with less flexibility and control over both the structure, quality, training, performance management, and long-term strategy of the contact center. And it would also have less flexibility when it comes to cost. Option 2, on the other hand, the internal contact center provides us with complete command and control over mission alignment, hiring, training, quality, performance management, and long-term vision. Also, all of the employees would be PA residents because we have a PA residency requirement. And we would have the highest level of cost control and the opportunity for future cost savings through option 2. In terms of cons, it's a very complex implementation plan that's going to be necessary. The transition planning is going to be detailed as well. And we would have higher upfront costs because we would have those transition costs. And then ultimately, we would be in charge of our own recruitment, which comes with attrition and the complexities of hiring for 100 to 250 CSRs, depending on the time of the year. Option 3, again, the request for proposal. The pros there are that it could potentially be higher value, it could potentially be lower cost, and we do have all those lessons learned to use. But the cons, again, are it's subject completely to what the proposals that would be submitted are. And we do know that more robust SLAs, if we put those in statements of work, could mean higher costs and even more limited flexibility when it comes to those costs. The next slide provides us just a very, very high level analysis. So, we put in all the financials and we looked at what the staffing models would look like. And then we went through each level to show what these are. So I'll just kind of pinpoint the high ones. So in terms of cost, it's not like any of the contact center options are going to be, say, below $10 million. It's currently we're paying between 18 and 19 million for contact center services. We're still going to be above 17 million with pretty much any option as long as we have the current enrollments that we have. But in terms of scalability, if we were to see those enrollments decrease with the changes that we're facing for 2026, the highest amount of scalability comes with option 2, because we would be able to figure out what we think is an acceptable speed to answer time, a quality rating, things like that, and we'd be able to adjust our cost structure accordingly. In terms of transition cost, option 1 has no transition cost. It's really deferred until the end of those option years expires, whereas options 2 and 3 both come with transition costs if we were to either use a new vendor or bring it internally. For quality and control, again, the highest level comes with option 2 because of the fact we'd have direct control over it. For change management and risk for transition planning, the highest level comes with option 2 because we do have a full transition where we'd have to bring on a market increase in our current staffing levels, and we would have to implement a 2-year transition plan. In terms of overall flexibility, option 2 has the highest level because of the fact that we, again, would have complete control over the contact center staff and what their purposes and aims were. So we'd be able to really focus to make sure we're aligned with our strategic, our strategy and our goals. And then mission alignment, again, it's highest with option 2. The next slide shows us what those implementation costs would look like. So with option 2, I mentioned that there are a great deal of transition costs. Just wanted to point out so that we've estimated what it would cost for each of the years for implementation. So in 2026, we'd be looking at an additional $1.7 million. And that's to really hire some additional Pennie staff, as well as expand our current workspace and hire consultants to assist us with the implementation of the contact center. In 2027, again, we'd have consultant costs. We'd be hiring even more additional Pennie staff. And then what the real bulk of that cost is for Q4 of 2027, we would have a period of time where we would have basically 2 contact centers fully staffed. So Get Insured would still be providing their contact center services, and then Pennie CSRs would also be being onboarded and trained and in their nesting periods so that they could go live for January 1st, 2028. Additional costs include rent, software and systems integration, and equipment, and those are being incurred most likely in 2027. And then 2028, there's really a knowledge transfer component that would bring up those costs. The next slide shows us kind of how we're planning the key risks and mitigation. So this is, our recommendation is going to be going forward with option 2 with building an internal contact center. And we understand that it's a very, very large undertaking. It's kind of restructuring our entire operational process here. And it would be difficult to do. So in order to mitigate those risks that come with that and those difficulties that come with this transition planning, we have kind of started to put together what our risk matrix would look like. So the key ones that I want to point out, we would recommend exercising one option year with Get Insured, and that would allow us to have a full 2 years to mitigate all of these risks and to have a proper implementation plan with a phased rollout to start up for January 1st, 2028. Additionally, we would hire consultants to further augment our impressive expertise that we have at Pennie. So on staff currently, we have well over 16 decades of contact center experience, ranging from director level, management level, supervisors. We have people that have done IT integration, set up customer relationship management systems, and we have multiple people that have training experience as well within our roster. So we do have a very impressive roster of employees here when it comes to contact center experience, but we would still hire consultants to make sure that we weren't missing anything within the implementation plans, and if they could help us with further best practices or lessons learned. Speaking of lessons learned, we would utilize the ones that we've not only had with our current vendor, but also with other Commonwealth agencies and other state-based exchanges. So, there's multiple Commonwealth agencies that have their own internal contact center. We've been in close communication with them to get our cost estimates, to provide kind of our staffing models, and we would continue to leverage them. In terms of technology, we would utilize state procurements to try to utilize or to get the ideal price point for things like our customer relationship management, using existing contracts that other agencies have already been using. For staffing and hiring, again, we would kind of utilize best practices within the Commonwealth for our staffing, and we would be offering higher pay hourly as well as higher fringe benefits than the industry standard. Because we would be hiring Commonwealth employees, we believe that we'd be attracting and retaining higher quality candidates because we would be paying more and with a more lucrative benefits package. And then finally, for compliance and SLAs, we would be in charge of setting our own key performance indicators. So we'd be able to update the board each time we had a board meeting, and we could show how we're prioritizing quality, and we could show what each of our scores look like, whether it be speed to answer, handle time, or any of those metrics. And we could adjust and tweak what our goals were as necessary to make sure it aligned with what our overall mission statement was. And then from a privacy and security standpoint, we'd be able to also have more direct control over the contact center privacy and security component, and we'd be able to implement some rigorous processes to improve upon that. On the next slide, we go over, so this is ultimately our recommendation. I do apologize, I knew we were short on time, so I try to go through this quickly, but our recommendation is basically going to be that we build an internal contact center. We believe that this is the best alignment with those, again, those missions and goals that we've been speaking about each of these board meetings that we have. And the reason it does so is because it gives us that full control over delivery and quality. And it also gives us the ability to scale and maintain costs should we see decreased enrollments. Ultimately, I think this is kind of the long-term strategic value is most beneficial with this option. And while we do understand that it requires a significant investment in both time and money up front, it does allow us to best serve Pennsylvanians, both those who are currently enrolled with Pennie and also with those that are currently uninsured that we hope to reach and bring into the fold in the near future. And our focus, again, just to align with what our goals have been throughout the past year, has been really earning customers' trust. We think this will greatly improve that by providing objective and accurate information. We think this will help us to better simplify the complexities of the health insurance landscape for our consumers and instill confidence when they're making this critical decision, like choosing the health plan for their family. Additionally, we believe that we will focus on, this will increase awareness and ultimately our net promoter score of Pennie across all of Pennsylvania. And we believe that this will help us best prepare us to serve that crucial role as an educator of both our consumers and our key stakeholders like our sisters and brokers. And if you go to the next slide, please, I'll leave it up for discussion before we go to the proposed motion. But does anyone have any questions or comments?
Any questions on the call center for Rob? Colleen?
So I know one of the things you had noted on the slide was rent. So
Yeah.
Will the contact center agents be going to a specific location?
No,
Okay.
we would maintain, so currently our CSRs are remote, but they're throughout the country. We would still have remote CSRs, but the rent would be additional space for storage of equipment. And then we'd probably have an on-site training training apparatus just in case we needed to bring in supervisors or bring in teams for, complex appeals team. You could come in this day and do a training program. So we would need to expand our space. You've been to our office space. It's not big enough currently to handle kind of like the equipment control that we would need, but we're lucky enough that the other space within our building is still available. So we'd probably be able to get it right next to the office space that we currently have.
Okay. And then, where would the agents be located? Would they still be all over the US or just in PA?
No, just in PA. So we would have a PA residency requirement, but they could be in Greene County, Luzerne County. They could be in any of our 67 counties within the Commonwealth, which we think would also help to continually grow our brand recognition as well.
Okay. And how about redundancy? Like if there were, like obviously it's a decent sized state, or Commonwealth, I guess. But what happens if there is, some sort of storm event that hits the whole state?
And we have the early seeds of that plan being put together, but it would most likely involve a contractor for redundancy services should there be some sort of massive outage. That's kind of currently what we do. So if there was a massive outage right now, and for some reason half of our contact center say was indisposed, we do use actually another sub vendor that is available to take calls, notate that the system's down, and then schedule callbacks once the system's back up. So that's in the works right now, but it's something we'd have to iron out.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Hearing none, does someone want to make the motion to authorize Pennie to develop and implement its own call center as outlined in the staff's presentation and recommendation to the board?
This is Tia, so move.
I hear Tia. Joel Hopkins was second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We're 4 for 4 on unanimous votes today. Rolling right along, Devin? Nope, we're just skipping Devin altogether. Jennifer, we're going into the budget proposals. If you want to kick that off and kick it over to Heather.
Exactly. Yep. Thank you. This is our final section for today. And all I'll note is that, with the uncertainty going into next year, we did take a slightly different approach to budgeting. And so I'm going to hand it over to Heather Lemon, our CFO, to walk through that.
Good afternoon, everyone. So actually, before we get into the 2026 budget proposal, I first just want to kind of walk through currently how we're doing. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this is our 2025 financial overview. And you can see that if we start up at the top under the revenue section, the total revenue that we were anticipated to come in this year was around 129 million. And you can see here, January through September, we've already received in 98.3 million. And then we're expecting from October to December an additional 36.7 million. So we're actually anticipating to come in around 135 million, as opposed to what we originally projected at the 129 250. So that's really, really great news there. And it just continues to, support our stability across our organization. And then if we take a look at the expenses, you can see again, as we've been basically since inception, we've come in under budget. We're expecting that to also happen this year. If we look at the personnel expenses, we budgeted 9.5 million, and we're expecting to come in just under 8 million there. And then if we look at the operating side of the house, we had 61.5 million budgeted, and we'll be coming in estimated to come in under budget at right around 60.3 million. So the total operation expenses together was budgeted at 71 million, and we're expecting to spend around 68.3 million. And then with the reinsurance program, we budgeted 46,552,185, and that is exactly what we spent. And one thing just to point out with the reinsurance program, originally the board last year had approved the amount for 44.4 million, and we actually came in higher than that, and we came back and got additional authorization for another $2.1 million. So that's how we got to the total of the 46,552,185. So pulling all the pieces together, total expenses, what we had budgeted was 117.6 million, and we're expecting to come in about $3 million under budget at around 114 million. So that's how things are looking for this year. Before I jump into the 2026 information, does anybody have any questions about 25? Okay, hearing none. All right, so before I get into the information on the slide here, so as Jennifer mentioned, we definitely took a different approach this year. We actually have two different budget scenarios that we're going to be presenting. The first one is this one right here, is we're calling it our basic operations budget. So this version would be if the tax credits do not get extended. So for this one here, if we just take a look at the center section, the center column, for personnel, we're looking at around 9.9 million. And then in operating, it would be around 53,665,000. So that would give us a total operating budget of 63.6 million. And then the reinsurance program is actually, the costs are going up this year by about 3.8 million. So that amount's going to be 50,400,000. So pulling everything together, this version of the budget is 114 million. So it's still, is less than the current year, and that's even with a pretty significant increase to the reinsurance program. Any questions on this slide? Okay, hearing none.
On the personnel side, sorry, it's Colleen. I think if we were on the last slide, you were significantly under budget on personnel. Is that right, in the current year? So is this part of the call center stuff, or what we're looking at increasing the budget when we were significantly under budget last year? So I'm just curious what's driving that.
So we've been under budget because we've had several vacancies that we have been in the process of filling, and we're actually pretty close to getting all those positions filled. So the 9.935 is actually with full complement, and that does not include the call center positions. I'll actually get into that in a couple slides here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, and if we go to the next slide, I just pulled together some notes. So for personnel, we're not looking to add any new positions, except for the call center positions. We're just maintaining everything that we have. And then within operations, this version for external affairs, there'd be a reduction of advertising, printing and mailing, And that's pretty much the big differences there. And then in IT and ops, so there wouldn't be any type of system enhancements, no type of improvement or special projects. And then in general operating, we reduced like travel, training, subscriptions, memberships. So basically, we reduced all discretionary costs. And then finally, for reinsurance, like I mentioned, this one is actually an increase from the current year of $3.8 million. Then the last piece to talk about, like Rob had gone over in his slides, there would be an additional 1.7 million added into the budget, which would cover personnel and operating expenses. So next slide. Okay, so then basically pulling all the pieces together up at the top there, you'll see for the in-house call center, personnel costs would be around $450,000. Operating costs would be $1,250,000. That gives us our total of $1.7 million. So then if we pull our operating budgets together along with the reinsurance program and the in-house call center costs, that's how we get to our total budget amount on this version of 115.7 million. Any questions here? Okay. So then taking a look at what our operating net would be for this version of the budget, we're anticipating, like I mentioned, this is without the tax credits getting extended. So we're looking at reduced user fees. So we're expecting around 90.2 million, as well as our around 20 million, which consists of our federal grants, that grant money that we get, as well as treasury interest. So we're estimating the revenue to come in around 110.2 million. So if you take the revenue with the minus your expenses, so we're looking at an operating net of around 5.5, and we would have to actually draw down for the first time ever. We would have to actually draw down the 5.5 million out of our reserves. And this information here in this table does include the 1.7 million for the call center. So that's what we're looking at overall for this version of the budget. Any questions before I walk on to number 2? Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we're thinking things are gonna look like with the tax credits extended. So in the middle column there, you'll be able to see the difference in the numbers. Personnel is exactly the same that it is in the other version. But what you'll see here is the increases in the operational expenses. So for external affairs, that would be about 17.2 million. IT and ops would be around 41.4 million, and then general operating around 2.2 million. So total operating budget in this version together is the 70,831,000. And we pull in the reinsurance number of the 50.4 million. So this version of the budget total would be 121,231,000. Any questions before I get into a little more detail? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the big changes here, like I mentioned, is on the operational side. There's again no new positions other than the call center positions included for personnel, and then we're basically looking at level funding across the other program areas. For external affairs, level funded for advertising and creative services, and then IT and operations. We would be level funded for printing and mailing, and then general ops, we would again be level funded for travel and training. And like I already mentioned, the reinsurance cost, just like in the other version, would be an increase of 3.8 million, and the 1.7 million it isn't we would be included for the call center. So on the next slide, so this is pulling all the pieces together. The table at the top we already talked about, but down below, so it's showing you the total operating budget of the $70,831,000, and then pulling in the reinsurance program costs of $50,400,000, and then the in-house call center costs of the $1.7 million. So this version of the budget would be $122,931,000. Any questions? Nope, you guys are very quiet today with this. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we get into the motion, I just wanted to point out that with the two different scenarios, we felt the need to come up with two different versions, simply because of all the uncertainty around the tax credits. So this gives us, in both budgets, we can maintain our operational stability, but funding flexibility is crucial with the uncertainty. Either way, no matter which option we go with, we're definitely prepared, and there won't be any type of disruption to our core operations. So as far as the proposed motion, we're asking to approve the two proposed 2026 budgets that have been prepared for the expiration or extension of the enhanced premium tax credits expiring by 12/31, and to adopt the appropriate budget depending on what scenario actually materializes.
And one thing I'll add is that this gives us certainty for the first part of the year, but we would rebudget in February, in the February meeting, to adjust to whatever we've seen come out of open enrollment.
Any questions? All right. Anyone want to make the motion to approve the two proposed 2026 budgets that have been prepared for the expiration or extension of the EPTCs expiring by 12/31, and to adopt the appropriate budget depending on what scenario materializes? Again, recognizing that we'll revisit in February. Do we have a motion?
Joel, so moved.
Joel moves. Second? Do we have one?
Tracy, second.
Dr. Conti seconds. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Seeing any other, we made it to the end. So any other business? Devin, Jennifer, anything? No?
No, that's
We
everything.
have caught up and ended early somehow. All right, great. Well, thank you all very much for a very productive meeting. We'll talk sooner than later, I think, and as we continue to work towards the end of this month, and hopefully we won't have to delay open enrollment, but we're prepared if we do. So let's hope we get to voting in Congress. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.